Welcome to my channel, where every story comes to life. Dive into captivating narratives that spark your imagination. Let's start today. New narrative story. Meet Ethan Ramirez, a 38-year-old entrepreneur who lived in the vibrant city of Seattle. For the past decade, Ethan had been building his business and his life with his wife, Isabella, who was 34 and worked as a high-powered marketing executive. Together, they had 2 young children, a boy and a girl, and from the outside looking in, they had the perfect life. Their friends often commented on how lucky they were, how strong their marriage seemed, and how nothing could come between them. But Ethan started noticing subtle changes over the past 6 months. Isabella was more distant, often lost in thought, and more attached to her phone than usual. She'd tell him about work events, late-night meetings, and the occasional girls' night out, which he trusted at first. But the way she'd smile down at her phone, the texts she never shared, and the increase in her work obligations gnawed at Ethan's intuition. Still, Ethan didn't want to jump to conclusions. His friends told him that marriages go through phases, that the demands of work and kids can make things feel distant at times. But late at night, when Isabella was sleeping beside him, he'd lie awake, wondering if there was more to her behavior than just stress. The tipping point came when Isabella's boss, Luke, a 40-year-old tech CEO, invited them both to an exclusive networking event at his luxurious penthouse in downtown Seattle. Luke was the type of man who exuded confidence and power, a slick, well-dressed executive who always had a smirk that never sat well with Ethan. He was successful, charismatic, and seemed to have the perfect life, much like Ethan. But there was something about the way Luke looked at Isabella at these events, the way his hand lingered just a little too long on her shoulder when they greeted each other. Ethan brushed it off. After all, what kind of man would invite a couple to a party if he was having an affair with the wife? Yet a small, nagging voice in Ethan's head told him to stay vigilant. On the night of the party, Ethan and Isabella arrived at Luke's penthouse, which boasted sweeping views of the city skyline. The space was filled with well-dressed professionals, clinking glasses of champagne, and a band playing smooth jazz in the background. Isabella looked stunning in a sleek black dress, her makeup flawless, her smile radiant. Ethan couldn't help but feel proud to have her by his side, but that nagging feeling still lingered. As the night progressed, Isabella mingled effortlessly, catching up with co-workers, including Luke, who was his usual charming self. Ethan kept a close eye on them, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. That was until about an hour into the party, when Isabella excused herself, saying she needed to catch up with a friend in a quieter part of the penthouse. Ethan nodded, not wanting to appear suspicious, but this time he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Instead of following her immediately, Ethan decided to give her a bit of space. He mingled with a few guests, trying to distract himself from the gnawing suspicion that was building inside him. But after 15 minutes, curiosity got the best of him. He excused himself from a conversation, quietly slipping away from the crowded living room. Wandering through the halls of Luke's sprawling penthouse, Ethan eventually made his way to a dimly lit back garden area secluded from the main party. There, in the soft glow of the garden lights, he froze as he overheard voices. He immediately recognized one as Luke's, smooth, cocky, and slightly tipsy. The other voice belonged to a man he didn't recognize. But what caught Ethan's attention was the conversation. "I don't know how she does it, man. Isabella can slip out of her husband's arms and into mine like it's nothing. Last weekend was insane. We met up at that hotel near the waterfront. You wouldn't believe what happened." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Did he hear that correctly? He moved closer, careful not to make a sound, his heart pounding in his chest as he listened in disbelief. "Does her husband know anything? I mean, you're playing with fire here, man," the other voice said. "Nah, Luke replied confidently. Ethan's too busy with his business to even notice. And besides, Isabella knows how to keep secrets. She's smarter than most women I've been with. Ethan's hands trembled. His worst fears were being confirmed right before his ears. His wife, the woman he trusted above all others, was having an affair with her boss. And the way Luke spoke about her, as if she were just another conquest in his string of affairs, filled Ethan with rage, but he wasn't the type to confront in the heat of the moment. He would be smart about this. Ethan stayed hidden, listening for as long as he could. He learned that their affair had been going on for nearly 6 months, with secret hotel meetings, late-night phone calls, and business trips that were really just excuses for their rendezvous. By the time Ethan slipped away from the garden, he had heard enough. That night, Ethan returned home with Isabella, acting as if nothing had changed. He smiled, laughed, and made small talk, all the while his mind was spinning with a plan. He wasn't going to confront her right away. He needed evidence, cold, hard proof. And so, over the next few days, Ethan became a different man. He became strategic, careful, and methodical in his approach. He installed tracking apps on Isabella's phone without her knowing, hacked into her email accounts, and even hired a private investigator. Over the next 2 weeks, he gathered everything he needed: text messages between her and Luke, photos of them at hotels, and even phone records that confirmed what he had overheard at the party. With each piece of evidence that came in, Ethan's heart broke a little more. But his resolve grew stronger. He wasn't going to just confront her. He was going to make sure that when this all came to light, it would be unforgettable. A month after the first party, Luke was throwing another event, and this time Ethan knew it would be the perfect setting for his revenge. This party was bigger, with even more high-profile guests in attendance. Ethan arrived with Isabella, playing the role of the doting husband, while she remained blissfully unaware of what was about to happen. Halfway through the night, Ethan excused himself from a conversation, telling Isabella he was going to make a toast. She smiled at him, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. As Ethan took the microphone, the room grew quiet, with all eyes on him. Isabella stood beside Luke, her smile faltering slightly as Ethan's gaze locked onto hers. "I'd like to make a toast to my incredible wife, Isabella," he began, his voice calm and measured. "For 10 years we've shared our lives, built a family, and created memories I thought would last forever." The room was silent, the air thick with tension as Ethan continued. "But sometimes life surprises you. Sometimes the people you trust the most turn out to have secrets they keep hidden." Isabella's face turned pale as her eyes widened in shock. She tried to step forward, but Ethan held up a hand, stopping her in her tracks. "And tonight, in front of all of you, I'd like to share one of those secrets." With a press of a button, the large projector screen behind him lit up with images. The room gasped as pictures of Isabella and Luke appeared, photos of them sneaking into hotels, texts exchanged between them, even audio recordings of their late-night calls. Ethan had left no stone unturned. Isabella stood frozen, her face ashen, while Luke tried to make a quick exit, but the crowd had already turned on them. Ethan looked directly at them, his voice calm but with an edge of finality. "In the end, secrets never stay hidden for long, and now everyone knows the truth." The fallout was swift and brutal. Within days, Ethan had filed for divorce, secured full custody of the kids, and ensured that Luke's reputation was ruined. The affair became public knowledge, and Luke was forced to resign from his company amidst the scandal. As for Isabella, she lost everything: her marriage, her standing in the community, and the trust of everyone around her. Ethan, meanwhile, found a sense of peace. He had rebuilt his life from the ashes of betrayal, stronger than ever. In the end, the best revenge wasn't just exposing the truth. It was reclaiming his happiness. "Wow, what a ride!" Thanks for joining us on this intense journey of betrayal and ultimate revenge. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and leave a comment below. We'd love to hear what you think. And of course, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you never miss another incredible story from Reddit Stories Unveiled. What would you have done if you were in Ethan's shoes? Let us know in the comments, and we'll see you next time.
Welcome to Narrative Stories. In the enchanting world of tales and adventures, we are thrilled to have you as part of our community of story enthusiasts. Here, we delve into compelling narratives that inspire and captivate, bringing characters and plots to life. Thank you for subscribing, and I look forward to sharing many remarkable stories with you. Margaret, a frail elderly widow, entered the Grand Bank building. Its towering columns and pristine windows seemed almost to mock her modest appearance. She hesitated for a moment, taking in the imposing structure that loomed above her, but then squared her shoulders and stepped inside. The bank's marble floors and high ceilings amplified the hushed conversations and the soft clicking of computer keyboards. Margaret walked towards the customer service area, clutching a worn leather handbag to her chest. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on Mr. Thornton, a banker known for his sharp suits and sharper tongue. He was sitting at his desk, chatting with a colleague, a smirk playing on his lips. Margaret took a deep breath and approached him, hoping this would be the day her troubles would end. "Excuse me, sir," Margaret began, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Thornton looked up, his eyes narrowing as he took in her appearance. She wore a simple, well-worn dress, and her silver hair was neatly pulled back. He raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "What can I do for you?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. Act 1. Margaret's struggle. 3 minutes. Margaret's background. Margaret's mind drifted back to her life with her late husband, Harold. He had been a kind, hard-working man who ensured they lived a comfortable life. They had a modest home, filled with love and laughter. Harold had always taken care of their finances, sparing Margaret the stress of dealing with money matters. However, after his passing, she found herself in dire financial straits, relying on the inheritance Harold had assured her would secure her future. Harold had often spoken of a substantial inheritance he had arranged, but he had never shared the details. Margaret trusted his words and had come to the bank, hoping to claim what was rightfully hers. Her heart pounded as she presented her documents to Mr. Thornton, explaining her situation. "Mr. Thornton, my husband passed away recently, and he told me that our inheritance was secured with your bank," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Thornton barely glanced at the documents before looking up at her with a cold, dismissive expression. The bank visit. "Do you have any idea how many people come in here with stories like yours?" Thornton asked, his smirk growing wider. "People like you, always expecting handouts." Margaret's face flushed with embarrassment, but she refused to back down. "Please, Mr. Thornton," she implored. "My husband assured me that our future was safe with this bank. I need your help." Thornton's initial reaction was cold and dismissive. He waved her off, indicating his disinterest. Thornton leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest. "People like you," he repeated, shaking his head. "Always coming in here, thinking you're owed something. It's pathetic." His laughter echoed through the bank, drawing the attention of other customers and employees. Margaret felt her face burn with humiliation, but she stood her ground. Margaret's determination. "Mr. Thornton, please," she said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill over. "This inheritance is all I have left. My husband assured me it was with your bank." Thornton's response was another cruel laugh. "Sure he did," he said, leaning forward. "And I suppose he told you he was best friends with the bank's founder, too." Margaret's eyes flashed with determination. Welcome to Narrative Stories. In the enchanting world of tales and adventures, we are thrilled to have you as part of our community of story enthusiasts. Here, we delve into compelling narratives that inspire and captivate, bringing characters and plots to life. Thank you for subscribing, and I look forward to sharing many remarkable stories with you. Margaret, a frail elderly widow, entered the grand bank building. Its towering columns and pristine windows seemed almost to mock her modest appearance. She hesitated for a moment, taking in the imposing structure that loomed above her, but then squared her shoulders and stepped inside. The bank's marble floors and high ceilings amplified the hushed conversations and the soft clicking of computer keyboards. Margaret walked towards the customer service area, clutching a worn leather handbag to her chest. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on Mr. Thornton, a banker known for his sharp suits and sharper tongue. He was sitting at his desk, chatting with a colleague, a smirk playing on his lips. Margaret took a deep breath and approached him, hoping this would be the day her troubles would end. "Excuse me, sir," Margaret began, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Thornton looked up, his eyes narrowing as he took in her appearance. She wore a simple, well-worn dress, and her silver hair was neatly pulled back. He raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "What can I do for you?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. Act 1. Margaret's struggle. 3 minutes. Margaret's background. Margaret's mind drifted back to her life with her late husband, Harold. He had been a kind, hard-working man who ensured they lived a comfortable life. They had a modest home, filled with love and laughter. Harold had always taken care of their finances, sparing Margaret the stress of dealing with money matters. However, after his passing, she found herself in dire financial straits, relying on the inheritance Harold had assured her would secure her future. Harold had often spoken of a substantial inheritance he had arranged, but he had never shared the details. Margaret trusted his words and had come to the bank, hoping to claim what was rightfully hers. Her heart pounded as she presented her documents to Mr. Thornton, explaining her situation. "Mr. Thornton, my husband passed away recently, and he told me that our inheritance was secured with your bank," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Thornton barely glanced at the documents before looking up at her with a cold, dismissive expression. The bank visit. "Do you have any idea how many people come in here with stories like yours?" Thornton asked, his smirk growing wider. "People like you, always expecting handouts." Margaret's face flushed with embarrassment, but she refused to back down. "Please, Mr. Thornton," she implored. "My husband assured me that our future was safe with this bank. I need your help." Thornton's initial reaction was cold and dismissive. He waved her off, indicating his disinterest. Thornton leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest. "People like you," he repeated, shaking his head. "Always coming in here, thinking you're owed something. It's pathetic." His laughter echoed through the bank, drawing the attention of other customers and employees. Margaret felt her face burn with humiliation, but she stood her ground. Margaret's determination. "Mr. Thornton, please," she said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill over. "This inheritance is all I have left. My husband assured me it was with your bank." Thornton's response was another cruel laugh. "Sure he did," he said, leaning forward. "And I suppose he told you he was best friends with the bank's founder, too." Margaret's eyes flashed with determination. The Thompsons were a family admired by all who knew them. Michael, 34, had climbed the corporate ladder to become a successful businessman, revered for his charm and wit. His wife, Emily, 32, was the epitome of grace and dedication, having chosen to stay at home to care for their 2 young children. They lived in an upscale neighborhood, surrounded by well-manicured lawns and friendly neighbors who often commented on how perfect their lives seemed. But behind the closed doors of their pristine home, the reality was far less idyllic. The Thompsons' marriage had once been filled with passion and excitement, but over the years, routine had taken over. The spark that had once defined their relationship had faded, leaving behind a dull ache of discontent for Michael. Despite his success, he felt trapped in a life that no longer thrilled him. His days were a blur of meetings and business deals, and his evenings were spent in the silence of a home that no longer felt like a sanctuary. Emily, on the other hand, was unaware of the growing chasm between them. She was too focused on keeping the household running smoothly, convinced that maintaining a perfect home and family was enough to keep their marriage alive. Michael's restlessness grew with each passing day. He began staying late at work, finding solace in the quiet of his office, away from the pressures of home. Emily noticed his distance, but attributed it to the stress of his demanding job. She tried to engage him in conversation, suggesting vacations or date nights, but her efforts were met with indifference. The more she tried to connect with him, the more he seemed to pull away, leaving her feeling isolated and insecure. Despite her growing concerns, Emily continued to put on a brave face, believing that things would eventually return to normal. She focused on her children, her friends, and her home, all the while ignoring the nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong. The illusion of their perfect life was beginning to crack, but Emily was determined to hold it together, unaware that the source of her husband's discontent was not just his work, but something far more personal and devastating. This was the perfect illusion, the outward appearance of happiness masking the deepening void within their marriage. Little did Emily know that the person who would shatter this illusion was someone she trusted implicitly. The betrayal that was about to unfold would not only destroy her marriage, but also tear apart the very foundation of her family. As Emily struggled to hold on to her marriage, another relationship within the family began to develop, one that was both unexpected and dangerous. Margaret, Emily's mother, had recently moved closer to the Thompsons after the death of her husband. At 52, Margaret was a woman of elegance and sophistication, having always maintained a certain air of confidence and poise. She had a complicated relationship with her daughter, often feeling overshadowed by Emily's youth and the seemingly perfect life she had built. But after her husband's passing, Margaret found herself lonely and vulnerable, seeking comfort wherever she could find it. Margaret and Michael's relationship began innocently enough. They had always gotten along well, with Margaret often praising Michael for his accomplishments and the way he provided for his family. After her husband's death, Margaret leaned on Michael for support, finding solace in their conversations. Michael, feeling increasingly disconnected from Emily, found an unexpected confidant in Margaret. She understood his frustrations and offered him the validation he craved. Over time, their conversations became more frequent and more personal. What began as simple exchanges about life and business evolved into deeper, more intimate discussions. They would meet for coffee or lunch, often without Emily's knowledge, under the guise of discussing family matters. As their bond grew stronger, Michael found himself drawn to Margaret in a way he hadn't anticipated. She was different from Emily, more experienced, more understanding, and less demanding. Margaret, for her part, felt flattered by the attention Michael gave her. She hadn't felt desired in years, and the feelings that stirred within her were both thrilling and dangerous. The line between what was appropriate and what was not began to blur. One evening, after a family gathering, Margaret and Michael found themselves alone in the kitchen, cleaning up after the guests had left. The atmosphere was relaxed, and after a few glasses of wine, they began to talk about their respective frustrations and desires. The conversation grew more intimate, the tension between them palpable. Without fully realizing what was happening, they crossed a line that would change everything. A lingering touch, a stolen glance. Soon they were caught up in a moment that neither of them had anticipated. What had started as a bond over shared grief and loneliness, Michael's behavior became erratic. He would disappear for hours, offering vague excuses that only heightened Emily's suspicions. When he was home, he was distant, often lost in thought or absorbed in his phone. Emily, who had always trusted her husband implicitly, began to feel a growing sense of unease. The man she had loved and married seemed to be slipping away, and she couldn't understand why. She tried to dismiss her fears, attributing his behavior to stress or work, but the nagging feeling that something was wrong wouldn't leave her. Desperate for answers, Emily confided in her best friend, Sarah. The two women had been close for years, and Emily felt that Sarah would offer her the support and guidance she needed. "I don't know what's happening, Sarah," Emily said one afternoon, as they sat together in a quiet corner of their favorite cafe. "Michael has been so distant lately. He's always working late, and when he's home, it's like he's not really here. I'm starting to think there's something he's not telling me." Sarah listened carefully, her expression growing more concerned with each word. "Emily, I think you need to talk to him," she suggested. "You deserve to know what's going on. If something is bothering him, you need to get it out in the open." Emily nodded, though the thought of confronting Michael filled her with dread. She wasn't sure she was ready to hear the truth, whatever it might be, but she knew she couldn't continue living in this state of uncertainty. That evening, she decided to have a serious conversation with Michael, hoping that they could finally address the growing distance between them. But fate intervened before she could act. The very next day, Emily returned home, unexpectedly early, from a visit to her sister's house. As she entered the house, she was greeted by an eerie silence. Assuming Michael was still at work, she made her way upstairs, only to hear muffled voices coming from the bedroom. Her heart raced as she approached the door, her mind racing with possibilities. What she found when she opened the door shattered her world. There, in the bedroom they shared, were Michael and Margaret, caught in a moment of undeniable intimacy. The scene was like a nightmare. Her husband and her mother, the two people she trusted most, betraying her in the most devastating way possible. Emily's shock quickly turned to anger, and she let out a scream that echoed through the house. Michael and Margaret sprang apart, their faces pale with guilt and fear. They had been discovered, and the illusion they had worked so hard to maintain was destroyed in an instant. The aftermath of that fateful day was nothing short of catastrophic. Emily's world had been turned upside down, and the betrayal she had uncovered left her reeling. The two people she loved and trusted most had shattered her heart, and she didn't know if she could ever recover. The days that followed were filled with tears, anger, and endless questions. How could this have happened? How long had they been deceiving her? Emily felt as though the foundation of her life had been ripped away, leaving her standing on shaky ground. Margaret, consumed by guilt and shame, retreated into herself. She knew that what she had done was unforgivable, and the consequences of her actions were now painfully clear. She tried to reach out to Emily, to explain, to apologize, but her daughter wanted nothing to do with her. The relationship that had already been strained was now irreparably damaged. Margaret, who had lost her husband not long ago, now faced the prospect of losing her daughter as well. The weight of her choices bore down on her, and she found herself sinking into a deep depression, withdrawing from the world and isolating herself from everyone she had once cared about. Michael, on the other hand, was left to face the fallout of his actions. He had destroyed the trust and love that Emily had given him, and the life they had built together was in ruins. He moved out of their home, taking only the bare essentials, and found himself alone in a small, impersonal apartment. The silence of his new life was deafening, and he was forced to confront the reality of what he had done. He had lost everything: his wife, his family, and the respect of the woman he had once admired. The thrill of the affair was long gone, replaced by a deep, gnawing regret. As the days turned into weeks, Emily struggled to find a way forward. She threw herself into her work and her children, trying to distract herself from the pain. But no matter how busy she kept herself, the hurt was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. The memories of her life with Michael haunted her, and the betrayal she had suffered left deep scars that would take a long time to heal. She contemplated divorce, knowing that she could never trust Michael again, but the thought of breaking up her family was almost too much to bear. Emily sought solace in therapy, hoping to find some clarity and peace. Her therapist encouraged her to focus on herself, to take the time she needed to heal, and to not rush into any decisions. Emily knew that she needed to put herself first, for the sake of her own well-being and for her children. Slowly, she began to rebuild her life, one step at a time. She reconnected with old friends, took up new hobbies, and started to rediscover the person she had been before her life had been consumed by betrayal and heartache. Margaret, meanwhile, continued to spiral downward. The guilt she felt was overwhelming, and she struggled to find a way to atone for her actions. She reached out to Emily time and again, hoping for a chance to make things right. But Emily's forgiveness was not easily won. Margaret knew that she might never be able to repair the damage she had done, and the thought of losing her daughter forever was a burden she could barely carry. She sought comfort in her faith, turning to prayer and reflection in the hopes of finding some semblance of peace. In the months that followed, the Thompsons' lives changed irrevocably. Emily, though still hurt and angry, began to find a new sense of strength and independence. She realized that she didn't need to be defined by her marriage or by the betrayal she had suffered. She was her own person, capable of building a life that was fulfilling and meaningful. Even without Michael, she decided to pursue a new career, one that would allow her to channel her pain into something productive. With the support of her friends and therapist, she started to see a future for herself that wasn't tied to the past. Michael, too, was forced to come to terms with the choices he had made. He sought therapy of his own, trying to understand why he had thrown away the life he had built with Emily. The process was painful, forcing him to confront the deepest parts of himself and the motivations behind his actions. He realized that his dissatisfaction had been more about his own insecurities than anything wrong with his marriage. But the damage was done, and he knew that he might never be able to repair the trust he had broken. Margaret's journey was perhaps the most difficult of all. The loss of her relationship with Emily weighed heavily on her, and she struggled to find a way to move forward. She continued to reach out to Emily, hoping for reconciliation, but the road to forgiveness was long and uncertain. Margaret knew that she had a lot of work to do, not just in rebuilding her relationship with her daughter, but in coming to terms with the choices she had made and the person she had become. In the end, the Thompsons' story is one of betrayal, loss, and ultimately, the search for redemption. The wounds they inflicted on each other were deep, but with time, they began to heal. Emily learned that she was stronger than she had ever known, capable of standing on her own and creating a life that was truly hers. Michael learned the hard way that actions have consequences, and that the thrill of the moment is never worth the pain it can cause. Margaret, too, learned that forgiveness is a journey, one that requires patience, humility, and a willingness to change. Though their lives would never be the same, the Thompsons found a way to move forward, each in their own way. They were no longer the perfect family they had once appeared to be, but they were wiser, stronger, and more resilient than before. And in the end, they discovered that even in the face of betrayal, there is always a path to healing, if one is willing to walk it. Thank you for being a part of Narrative Stories. Your support and engagement mean the world to us. We are committed to bringing you the best in storytelling. What kinds of stories would you like to see next? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
Hello there. These days, I'm seeing the son of my boss. He's a handsome young man, much younger than me. I've been too embarrassed to tell anyone, but today I feel compelled to share my story online. I am a woman in her 50s. Let me introduce my family. I have a son and a daughter. Both are working now. I don't have a husband. My husband passed away when our eldest child was in middle school and became a star in the sky. He was devoted to his work, so much so that I used to say he seemed busier than the president. He would come home late on weekdays, and even on weekends, he would receive many work-related calls. Thankfully, Our children grew up well. Despite his busy schedule, my husband always made time to play with our children. He was like a friend to them. Whenever he found time, he would take us to museums, experiential places, newly built shopping malls, valleys, and beaches. Thanks to him, we made many memories. I worked as well, but my workplace was near home, so it was a bit easier for me. My mother lived in the same apartment complex, so she would look after the children when I had to work late. I also frequently met and spent time with my sister's family, who lived just 15 minutes away from home. Some sons-in-law find it uncomfortable to live close to their mother-in-law's house, but my husband was quite gentle. He thought it would be better for both of us if we lived near my parents after having a child. So we moved to the apartment where my parents lived. My job involved dealing with people and was funded by the country's taxes, so I had to be very meticulous, which made me quite edgy throughout the day. But when I came home and saw our children's playful antics, it helped me unwind and relieve the day's stress. We lived an ordinary life, just like everyone else, until one day, we noticed that my husband's health was deteriorating. He suddenly lost weight and was diagnosed with cancer. I left our children with my parents and devoted myself to nursing my husband, but he passed away in less than a year. Fortunately, we had good insurance, so we received a decent amount of insurance money. Without my husband, I felt extremely empty, but living with my busy son helped me gradually forget. I had to feed and live with my children somehow. The boss knew about my husband's death and called me back to work. It was difficult to work for a while, but with his encouragement, I was able to work gratefully. Before going to bed, I started reading posts on a local online cave and found that there were quite a few people who had gone through painful experiences like me. I started meeting with these people and gradually let go of my pain. Of course, religion played a part as well. My family regained strength and stood up again. The workplace I mentioned is operated with the country's money. However, a clerical worker made a mistake, which led to an investigation. As a result, it was found that he had been overcharging for a long time, and the rumor spread that our business had mishandled its work, so we had to close it down. As a result of that incident, I found myself unemployed. Of course, I was able to get by for a few months with the unemployment benefits I received due to the closure of the business. But with the cost of my children's education, I had to find a new job. That's when I came across a job advertisement in a local community. The job was to inspect knit products, and the factory was about a 10-minute drive from my home. I had always worked in my field of study, in an office, but I had never worked in a factory. That was my first time setting foot in a factory. I was interviewed by a woman who appeared to be about my age. She introduced herself as the team leader of the factory. She said that the boss was always on the move and wouldn't be around much. She said that while experienced people are good at this job, those who are willing to learn and pay attention to detail often find it enjoyable. She said it's not a headache. You can listen to whatever you want with your earphones in, and all you have to do is meet your daily quota. I thought it would be fun once I got used to it. She asked me to give an answer on the spot if I could, so I said I would start working from the following Monday. Then I started going to the factory. I greeted my coworkers and started working. At noon, we went to a nearby restaurant for lunch, and we didn't have to pay. They had a contract with the restaurant and would settle the bill later. We had coffee until 1 o'clock, chatted with the coworkers, and then got back to work. At 3 o'clock, they told us to stop working. I asked the person sitting next to me what was going on, and she said it was snack time. There was a young male worker in the factory who was quite handsome. I asked a coworker about him, and she said he was the boss' son. His name was Theron, and he was studying business after graduating from college. Theron was very kind, giving out snacks to the older women and greeting them. The same was true for the other workers. The workers were mostly middle-aged women in their 40s and 50s, and there was even an older sister who seemed to be in her late 60s. Working in a factory involves repetitive tasks, so my shoulders and arms hurt. I thought I might develop an occupational disease from doing this work, but a coworker told me, "You'll get used to this job too. At first, you'll have to go to the hospital for physical therapy. But later, it won't hurt because your body gets used to it. Think of it as a passing phase." She was right. For the first few weeks after I started working, I went to the hospital after work. How could a housewife not use her arm as advised? I had to prepare meals for my children at home, do laundry, wash dishes, tidy up. I had no time to rest. My daughter, feeling sorry for me working in a factory, created a steam towel for me. She soaked a washcloth in water, put it in a plastic bag, and microwaved it for a minute. Keeping it on the sore parts helped relax the tense muscles. My body was tired, but it was good. Not having to deal with paperwork and getting to know the neighborhood ladies. I had fun going to work. To introduce myself, I've been complimented for my looks since I was young, which is a bit embarrassing to admit. I'm of average height, and despite being a mom of 2, I've been blessed with a body that doesn't easily gain weight. I'm really grateful for that. While others spend a lot of money to lose weight, I've never had to diet in my life. Even by my own standards, I thought I was the most attractive among those who worked in the knit factory. In fact, I was going to the factory every day looking forward to seeing Theron. Every day, Theron would kindly say, "You're working hard. Enjoy your snack," and bring new snacks. It's strange how the heart works. I started to have feelings for Theron, who was only a few years older than my son. I asked a coworker if Theron had a girlfriend, and she said she didn't know for sure, but probably not. I never expected to harbor such strange feelings. I started dressing up every day to look good for Theron. I should have worn comfortable clothes for work, but I put up with the discomfort and wore tight-fitting clothes. As I mentioned earlier, I was confident about my body. I felt Theron give me an extra glance as he gave me a snack and left. I started working at the beginning of the month, and it was now the end of the month. The factory paid wages at the end of every month, and I found out that they had a company dinner on the last day of the month. That's when I first met the boss, who I thought looked a lot like Theron. The company dinner was really fun. The boss said that our factories' products were getting a good reputation and were going to be exported to 10 countries. He said we should prepare for more work in the future. And as soon as he said, "Thanks to your hard work, I've doubled this month's salary," everyone cheered. The boss seemed to be a generous and kind person. Eating tortillas with beer made me feel even better. That day, we went to a karaoke bar for the second round. The boss said he should leave early on days like this, and the remaining employees had a great time. Then something exciting happened. Theron grabbed the microphone and started singing a ballad, and he was a good singer. He was handsome and a good singer, so I started to fall for him. I was drunk and the lyrics of the song were sad, so I started crying. Theron took my hand while he was singing, and we sang together. The older women were shouting, "Go for it, go for it." My heart was pounding at the thought of wanting to work things out with Theron, just like the older women suggested. After leaving the karaoke bar, the employees hurried home, and I was on my way home as well. I was the only one heading in the direction of my house when I heard, "Alicia, wait a minute." When I turned around, it was Theron. He said he had something to say and asked if we could talk somewhere nearby. We didn't want to go back into a bar, so we went to a playground in a nearby apartment complex. Theron asked if I was okay now. I had been crying earlier. I told him I had a moment of sorrow thinking about my late husband. Theron said he didn't know I had such pain and held my hand. His hand was warm. That's when I realized that age doesn't matter in love. I was attracted to Theron, and when Theron held my hand first, I felt like I was flying. Theron said he had something to tell me, but he wanted to do it after he was sober. That night, I couldn't sleep a wink. It wasn't because Theron was the boss's son. I felt him as a man because of his caring and kind impression, and I wanted to meet him if I had the chance. The next morning, just before I went to work, I received a text message. He said he wanted to talk after work and asked if I could come to Starbucks. I hesitated for a moment, then replied, "Of course, I can." I don't know where the energy came from as I hadn't slept and had been working all day. I worked lightly and met Theron. Theron said he wanted to meet with me. From that day on, we exchanged looks without the employees knowing. The number of dates increased, and we had a good time at night. Theron even said this one day. He said there's an empty room inside the factory office. It's a space to rest when tired from work. But the employees don't know about that room. After all the older women leave work, we can rest together in that room. Theron, who was coming on strongly, was so cute that I spent some good times in his room using overtime as an excuse. I've been seeing Theron for over a year. Theron and I love each other very much. The boss even raised my allowance, so I'm earning more than I did at my previous job. The boss says he will introduce me to his father when he gets a chance, but I have no intention of hindering the path of a young man or giving him a burden. It's amazing in itself that I have a boyfriend at this age. I'm quite satisfied with my situation. If Theron, who understands a widow's heart, is in a hurry, I'm thinking of rushing to him.
Welcome to my channel. Support our channel by subscribing. Your subscription helps us grow and create more intriguing content like this. Now let's dive into today's story. Let's start third part of the story. I learnt about my wife's affair after finding her wet pants. After that brief encounter with Chloe in the cafe, Liam felt a sense of relief that he hadn't anticipated. It wasn't a dramatic moment. There were no heated words or tears, no grand gestures of closure. Instead, it was simple, quiet, and unremarkable in a way that made it all the more meaningful. It was the end of something that had once been so deeply important to him, but now it felt like the natural conclusion to a story that had run its course. Chloe had been his past, but she no longer held any power over his present or future. Liam walked out of the cafe that day with his shoulders lighter, his heart feeling unburdened. In the months that followed, he found himself thinking about Chloe less and less. The old memories, the once vivid emotions tied to their time together, had faded into something distant. They were still there, but they no longer held the sharp edges of pain and betrayal. They were simply memories now, echoes of a different life. For the first time in years, Liam was able to enjoy solitude without the weight of regret or sadness. He found comfort in being alone, but not in a lonely sense. He had grown to appreciate the quiet moments, sitting on his apartment's balcony with a cup of coffee in the early morning, watching the sunrise over the city, spending afternoons lost in a good book, or going on hikes by himself, surrounded by nothing but the sounds of nature. These moments of peace allowed him to reconnect with himself, to rediscover the things he had once loved but had lost during the turmoil of his marriage and its aftermath. Liam realized that in order to truly heal, he needed to embrace the idea that he didn't need anyone else to make him whole. It wasn't that he didn't value companionship or love. His relationship with Sarah had shown him how beautiful and fulfilling that could be. But rather, he had learned that his happiness couldn't depend on someone else. It had to come from within. While Liam focused on his personal growth, his relationship with Sarah continued to deepen. What had initially started as casual dinners and late-night conversations blossomed into something much more. There was an ease between them, a natural flow that made their relationship feel like it was meant to be. Unlike his relationship with Chloe, which had once felt intense and almost performative, his connection with Sarah was grounded in authenticity and mutual respect. Sarah wasn't perfect, and Liam didn't expect her to be. They had their disagreements and challenges like any couple, but the difference was how they handled them. They communicated openly, honestly, and without fear of judgment. There were no secrets, no hidden agendas. Sarah was the type of person who could sit in comfortable silence with Liam for hours, and that silence never felt awkward or tense. It felt like home. As their relationship grew, Liam found himself opening up to Sarah about things he hadn't shared with anyone else, not even his closest friends. He told her about the betrayal with Chloe, the depth of his hurt, and how difficult it had been for him to trust again. He explained how the affair had shaken his belief in love and commitment, and how he had feared that he would never be able to let anyone get close to him again. But Sarah listened without judgment, without trying to fix him. She simply held space for him, allowing him to express the pain he had carried for so long. She understood that healing wasn't a linear process, that there would be good days and bad days, and in doing so, she helped Liam realize that it was okay to have scars, that it was okay to be vulnerable. In return, Liam supported Sarah in her own journey. She had her own past wounds to heal, her own experiences of heartbreak and disappointment. Together, they created a safe space for each other, one where they could both grow as individuals while also building something beautiful together. Liam knew that this relationship was different from anything he had experienced before, because this time it was built on a foundation of trust, mutual respect, and unconditional support. One evening, as Liam and Sarah were sitting on the balcony of his apartment, sipping wine and watching the sunset, Liam found himself reflecting on how far he had come since the end of his marriage. The journey hadn't been easy. It had been filled with pain, doubt, and moments of deep loneliness. But it had also been transformative. Liam had learned more about himself in the aftermath of the betrayal than he ever had during the years he had spent with Chloe. "You've changed," Sarah said softly, breaking the comfortable silence between them. Liam glanced over at her, surprised by the comment. What do you mean?" Sarah smiled, her eyes warm as she looked at him. "I mean, you seem lighter, more at peace. When we first started seeing each other, there was always this weight on your shoulders, like you were carrying something heavy, but now it's like you've let it go." Liam thought about her words for a moment and realized she was right. He had let go of so much, the anger, the resentment, the hurt that had once consumed him. It hadn't happened overnight, and it hadn't been easy, but slowly, over time, he had released the hold those emotions had on him. "I guess I have," Liam admitted, his voice thoughtful. "I never thought I'd get to this point. For a long time, I didn't think I'd ever be able to forgive Chloe for what she did. But now, I don't know. It just doesn't matter anymore." Sarah nodded, understanding. Forgiveness isn't about excusing what someone did. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of holding on to it. Liam smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the woman sitting beside him. She had been such an integral part of his healing journey, not because she had fixed him or taken away his pain, but because she had walked beside him as he worked through it on his own. She had given him the space to grow and the support to know that he wasn't alone. "Thank you," Liam said softly, his voice filled with sincerity. "For what?" Sarah asked, her brow furrowing in confusion. "For being here. For being you. For everything." Sarah smiled, leaning in to kiss him gently on the lips. "You don't have to thank me. I'm just happy to be with you." Months passed, and Liam's life continued to flourish. His career was thriving, his relationship with Sarah was stronger than ever, and he felt more grounded in himself than he ever had before. He had finally reached a place where he could look back on his past without feeling the sting of regret or bitterness. But life has a way of bringing old chapters to a close in unexpected ways. One afternoon, while Liam was out running errands in the city, he found himself walking past a familiar street. It was the street where Chloe's design firm was located. He hadn't been down that way in a long time, but something about it caught his attention, and before he knew it, he was standing outside the building, looking up at the sign. It was strange being back in this place, a place that had once felt so connected to his past life with Chloe. For a moment, Liam considered walking away. There was no need to linger in old memories. But just as he turned to leave, the door to the building opened, and Chloe stepped out. The moment their eyes met, time seemed to freeze. It had been well over a year since they had last seen each other, and the sight of her felt almost surreal. Chloe looked different. Her once vibrant energy seemed dimmed, her face more lined with stress. She paused when she saw Liam, her expression a mix of surprise and something else. Maybe guilt, maybe regret. "Liam," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Liam stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say. The last time they had spoken, it had been brief and polite, but this felt different. It felt like the universe was giving them one last opportunity to say the things they hadn't said before. "Chloe," Liam replied, his voice steady. "Chloe," Liam replied, his voice steady. For a few moments, they stood there in silence, the busy sounds of the city swirling around them, yet it felt as though they were in their own bubble. The past suddenly felt very close, like an old book being reopened, even though Liam had thought that chapter of his life was long closed. Chloe looked at him with a mix of emotions, and it was clear that she was as taken aback by this chance encounter as he was. "I didn't expect to see you here," Chloe said softly, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. There was a slight hesitation in her voice, as if she wasn't sure what else to say. "I didn't either," Liam admitted. He took a slow breath, realizing that while this moment felt surreal, it wasn't as overwhelming as he had once imagined it would be. He no longer felt the anger or resentment that used to grip him at the mere thought of Chloe. Instead, he felt at peace. Chloe glanced down at the ground, then back up at him, her eyes searching his face. "You look good," she said, her voice tinged with something like regret. "I mean better, happier." "I am," Liam said, not out of spite or pride, but as a simple truth. He had found happiness again. Happiness that wasn't tied to her or the life they had once shared. "A lot has changed." Chloe nodded, biting her lip. "I'm glad. You deserve that, Liam." There was a weight to her words, as though she was acknowledging in her own way the pain she had caused him. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, clearly unsure of how to proceed. I've thought about reaching out, but I didn't think it was right. After everything, Liam gave a small nod, his heart feeling lighter than he had anticipated. We both needed time to move on. I think we've done that. The tension between them, while still present, felt different now. It wasn't the unresolved bitterness of their last encounter, but rather a quiet understanding that the past was behind them. Chloe seemed to sense this too, and for the first time, she looked at him without the weight of guilt pressing down on her shoulders. "I was wrong, Liam," she said, her voice barely audible over the street noise. "About everything. About how I handled it, how I hurt you. I've had a lot of time to think, and I know now that I should have been honest from the beginning. I should have been better." Liam listened quietly, letting her words sink in. A year ago, hearing Chloe admit her wrongs might have fueled his need for validation. He might have wanted to throw her betrayal back in her face, to remind her of the pain she caused. But now, standing in front of her, he realized that he no longer needed her apology to heal. He had already healed on his own. "I appreciate that, Chloe," Liam said, his voice kind but firm. "But the truth is, I've moved past it. I've forgiven you, not because I needed your apology, but because I needed to let go of the anger. Holding on to it only held me back." Chloe's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but she didn't let them fall. Instead, she offered him a small, sad smile. "You're a better person than I ever gave you credit for." Liam shrugged slightly. "I just learned a lot about myself through all of this. About what I want, what I deserve. And I hope you've learned that about yourself too." Chloe nodded. "I have. It's been hard, but I've had to face a lot of truths about myself. I think I'm finally ready to start over." There was a long pause between them as they both absorbed the moment. It felt like a closing chapter, but in a way that wasn't bitter or filled with regret. It was the closure they hadn't had before. "I wish you the best, Chloe," Liam said, and he meant it. "You too, Liam," she replied softly. "You deserve all the happiness in the world." They exchanged one final glance before Chloe turned and walked away, blending into the crowd. Liam watched her go, feeling a strange mix of finality and peace. He had wondered for so long how he would feel if he ever saw Chloe again, if he would still be filled with anger or pain. But now, in the aftermath of their brief encounter, all he felt was a quiet release. He had moved on, truly. That evening, when Liam returned home, he found Sarah sitting on the couch, reading one of her favorite books. She looked up as he walked in, a warm smile spreading across her face. "How was your day?" she asked, putting the book down and standing up to greet him. Liam wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, and kissed her forehead. "It was good. Different, but good." Sarah tilted her head, a curious look in her eyes. "Different how?" Liam hesitated for a moment, wondering how best to explain the strange encounter with Chloe. But then he realized that with Sarah he didn't need to worry about how things sounded or whether he should filter his words. Their relationship was built on openness and trust, something he had come to cherish deeply. "I ran into Chloe today," Liam said, watching Sarah's expression closely. She raised her eyebrows slightly but didn't look upset or threatened. "Really? How was that?" Liam smiled at her calm reaction. "It was fine. Better than I thought it would be. We talked for a few minutes, and I think we both got the closure we needed." Sarah nodded, resting her hand gently on his arm. "That's good. Closure can be important, even if it comes later than expected." Liam pulled her closer, feeling the warmth of her presence steadying him. "Yeah. I didn't realize how much I needed it until it happened." but I think I'm finally at peace with everything now." Sarah smiled up at him, her eyes filled with understanding. "I'm really glad to hear that, Liam. You deserve that peace." As they stood there together in the soft glow of the evening, Liam couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude for Sarah, for the love they had built, and for the journey that had led him to this moment. Chloe had been a part of his life, but she was no longer the defining chapter. His future was with Sarah, and it was a future filled with possibilities that were his to shape. In the months that followed, Liam and Sarah's relationship continued to blossom. They traveled together, explored new cities, and created memories that filled Liam's heart in ways he hadn't known were possible. There was no rush to define their future, but there was a shared understanding that they were building something meaningful, something built on trust, respect, and love. Liam had learned so much from his past, but now he was focused on what lay ahead. He knew that life wasn't always easy, that love required work, patience, and vulnerability. But with Sarah, those challenges felt worth it. He had found someone who stood beside him not because she needed him to be perfect, but because she valued him for who he was, scars and all. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony of their apartment, Sarah resting her head on Liam's shoulder, he realized just how far he had come. He had been through heartbreak, betrayal, and loss, but he had emerged stronger on the other side. He had found a love that was real, a love that didn't demand perfection, but embraced the messiness of life. As the sun set on another day, Liam felt at peace in a way he hadn't in a long time. His journey had been filled with pain, but it had also been filled with growth, and now, standing on the other side of it all, he knew that the power to move on, to heal, and to love again had been within him all along. His past had shaped him, but it didn't define him. He was free. Liam's journey, from heartbreak and betrayal to healing and self-discovery, had finally come full circle. He had faced the pain of his past, learned valuable lessons about himself and others, and found the strength to open his heart to love again. His relationship with Sarah was a testament to the fact that, even after the darkest moments, there was always hope for a brighter future. Liam had found his peace, not in forgetting his past, but in accepting it as part of his story, a story that was still being written, filled with new adventures, new love, and new possibilities. In the end, Liam realized that the greatest lesson of all was this: the power to heal and move on was always within him. He had chosen to rise above the pain, to let go of the anger, and to embrace the beauty of starting over. And in doing so, he had found a love more true and lasting than he had ever known. Liam's journey had been long and difficult, but now he was ready for whatever came next, because he knew he was strong enough to face it no matter what. Thanks for watching and subscribe my channel.